Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So to start off the message today, I thought I would pull some inspiration from this little deck of cards. And it's got beautiful artwork. It's called Mushrooms, Daily Doses of Wisdom. And they're just very magical looking, the illustrations. And the quotes are just, it's kind of like there were no previews on the box when I bought it at the bookstore the other day, a couple weeks ago actually. And I like when they give you previews because you kind of know what you're getting. But it was sort of I kind of had to take a risk and cross my fingers, and it was a surprise, right? So the sayings are actually just kind of like hit or miss. Some of them actually are like, okay, that's something decent and worthwhile to think about. And then others are just sort of, they fall flat. It just doesn't. There's not a lot of substance there. So that's my honest review of these. But if I could buy them again, knowing what I know, I would still buy them. Because, again, the illustrations are beautiful. And some of the cards have useful thought prompts, you might say, right? So what I did was I pulled 3 cards. One of them says, I accept that things I cannot control are out of my control. And the first thing that I thought of when I read that is, well, it's kind of like saying, well, first of all, acceptance is good. That's a good thing when things are outside of our control. But this card could be either a thought that is on the healthy end of the spectrum, as well as way on the other side, okay, on the unhealthy end. On the unhealthy end, you might say, well, someone who's thinking like this is controlling everything that they can, right? And then those things that they can't control, it's like, well, okay, I accept I can't control this, but everything else that I can, I'm going to. And that could be good or bad, you know? You want to take authority over your own life, obviously, but there are people who overreach, you know, into others' territories and completely ignore boundaries and things like that when it comes to interpersonal relations and stuff like that, right? So that's kind of just, it's like, okay, we'll just kind of set that aside for a minute. But it did pique my interest because control has always been kind of an element, I might say, in my family, okay? And it has affected me, and I have had to work at becoming conscious even of breaking those kind of paradigms myself, right? And so my whole life I've had an interest in what drives people to want to be controlling, and I've wanted to learn and understand it. The next card, I'm going to tie all this in, says, I will never define your reality. And that's cool. That card basically means a person is committed to understanding that each person is their own person. And whether, you know, the way they are aligns with what you would prefer or not, you accept it, because that's their choice. It's honoring another person's autonomy. And we know that some people don't do that. Some people extend their need to control into another person's life, and then it becomes unhealthy, right? And so I'll hold the last card for later, but just look at this art. Isn't that beautiful? And but anyway, so I'll give you all an example, and I've used this example before in a past video, like way in the past. But, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind. My grandmother has passed on, right? And I loved her dearly, still do. But she was kind of like this, okay? She struggled to accept things that did not align with the way she thought they should be. And so, as an example, we know that as time moves on and things progress just naturally in the world, you know, everything becomes more modern. with technology and the way businesses are ran and everything, right? It's always ongoing and progressing. So she had sent I believe my uncle, to go purchase a recliner, some kind of chair, from a local furniture store. And she had done business with them in the past. So she sent him up there with one of her checks for him to just fill out, and I think she had signed it or whatever. And they wouldn't accept it. And so she couldn't handle it. It was a personal thing for her, even though for the business, it was simply just part of their practice. And logically, you would say, well, that rule that they have and abide by has to be in place for a good reason, you know? A lot of times, rules and stuff like that are developed, excuse me, because there's a need for it to be there in the first place, right? So here's my grandma stuck, you know, in nostalgia, not understanding why things can't be like the way they used to be 50 years ago, you know. And it was a personal thing for her, and it became something where she became so upset and just didn't want to do business with them anymore and things like that, okay? And so it was like, they're not going to get her money. If they can't, you know, do a deal on a handshake or whatever it is, she's just like, no, I'm not going to give them my money. So, you know, it didn't matter who tried to explain that this was not personal. You know, it just didn't matter. And I don't really know how it got resolved. It got resolved. I know that. And I don't remember the details, but that's one way, and I think that's kind of common for a lot of us as we age, is to accept, you know, the way things have been modernized to such a degree, you know, with especially like with AI and all the new robotics that are in production, and just, it's, you know, I could expand greatly on this, but we'll just kind of leave that there, okay? So going into the concept of control, I think that, let me just kind of fast forward, because I was driving to get my coffee, and I make coffee at home more often now too, nowadays, but I was just really feeling this one, so I came and got another one. So on my way here, I'm thinking all about this. Excuse me, I'm getting all choked up today. And at the very end, before I pressed record, okay, I'm thinking, and I kind of realized, you know, there's a difference in people who, for various reasons, operate in this sense of, it's almost like an OCD kind of thing, an obsessive compulsive, like an addiction that they're caught up in, and control is their drug of choice, or their coping mechanism, however you want to spin it, okay? And so they get, you know, super anxious if they can't control things. And I'll talk in a minute about why I think this can come about, because again, I'm reflecting on my own experiences within my family, okay? But I think that there's different degrees of this issue in people. And I think that I haven't explored the reasons why it can become, what's the word I want to use? Well, malignant. It can kind of turn, sort of like, if you have a wound that you have not tended to, and it gets infected, it's kind of like that. And so now it becomes really twisted and ethically perverted, and malicious, and all these things, right? And the way I think that this manifests is, if one of the reasons, there may be multiple, but if one of the reasons why a person enters into control in the beginning is because they have been conditioned through their life experiences that the world is against them, okay? And this could be because they grew up with parents that projected onto them, that shamed them, that made them feel like they were responsible for adult matters, and maybe they were the scapegoat or whatever. So if somebody grows up, as an example, in this paradigm believing that they are, whether they believe they're guilty or not, even if they're strong and they're able to pull themselves through their childhood not taking on that guilt, they're still growing up experiencing catching all of this blame for things that they have nothing to do with. But this other person or parent is perceiving that everything's the child's fault, okay? Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're just blaming them anyway. I don't know. But there's still all this coming at them, okay? Well, possibly the thought is, okay, if I can control everything around me to make sure nothing ever goes wrong, okay, and everything is perfect, and then we get into the ailment of perfectionism, which is right there with OCD, in my opinion, okay? But this might drive a person to want to try and make everything so perfect that there's no possible way anybody can blame them or see fault in them, because remember, they're growing up with this paradigm that they're responsible for things that they shouldn't be responsible for. Okay, their environment, everything that they're a part of, and even things they're not a part of, and all this stuff. So this kind of gets into even narcissism, right? Where, a person thinks the whole world revolves around them. And so we could sit here, I'm thinking about like a whiteboard, and we could start making notes and drawing one of those maps. I forget how you do it, but it's like you put a concept down, you circle it, and then you make a little arm or a branch that comes down here, and it's tied over here to this, and then this is tied to this, and then over here, and then these two wind up connecting down here. And in college, those kind of things used to blow my mind. I couldn't stand it. It was like I could hang with the presentation for a little while, and then after a while I would think this is just getting too complicated. But now that I'm older, I think if I was the one mapping everything out, it would probably help for me to make those connections, to see it visually, because I am a visual oriented person. But all these things are kind of intertwined, to some degree. Control, OCD, perfectionism, narcissism, all this stuff. But then you have this concept of people who are intentionally malicious, okay? Stuff like, as an example that I'm going to use, playing mind games. From your perspective, playing mind games, like, I don't know why, for fun, to feel powerful, that they got one over on you, intellectually, or who knows, when you're on the receiving end, it's like, you can't understand the motivation of some people. It just doesn't make sense, okay? And that's not even getting into really the heavier parts of psychological abuse and other kind of avenues of abuse either. And I know this message is all over the place, but I'm processing with you, so I hope you find value regardless. But the way I think that a person who is very much rooted and grounded in control, the way I think that becomes malicious is if you are a person in their life that they can't control, remember, they need to control everything and everyone for various reasons, okay? If they can't control you, you're seen as a threat. And so then this is when the whole situation can turn malicious. This is when you catch them playing mind games with you. And if you've ever heard the term dog whistling, and sabotaging relationships in your life, triangulating you. These are all very real tactics. It took me a while to really grasp what this looks like in real life. It's one thing to understand things academically, like from a textbook stance, you can grasp it that way. But then to apply it to a real life situation, now you're going from doing the math problem to a word problem, which I always struggled with in school. But that's kind of essentially what you have to learn to do to really understand how some of these people operate, and not that you'll ever fully understand, but enough to kind of be at peace with the whole situation as far as your grasp on it. Okay. But when they can't control a person, that person's seen as a threat. And I think that the way you'll know this is there will be just these random moments when you are engaged with these people it won't come off as malicious. It will come off, they call this the covert type of person. It will come off as mind games, as twisting your reality, as gaslighting you, as circular conversations, as sabotaging your efforts in life, sabotaging your relationships, and getting one over on you because maybe they found something out that was, very private in your life, and then they repeat it back to you, and you're like, how do they know that? But it's done in a way that you can't accuse them, because that's what they call like dog whistling. Like only you know the little crumb that was dropped for you to pick up to give you a message, but everybody else missed it because it wasn't stated directly. So there are all these tactics that basically indicate that it has turned into a malignant thing. So again, it's one thing for people to be controlling, and I think we all are to a degree, and wanting to have control over your life can be a healthy thing. It's it can basically mean that you're responsible and accountable, and you are taking authority over your own life and stuff. There are people who live completely in the lack of control and act like they have no control over anything. They're just perpetual victims, and everything's happening to them, and they can't do anything about it when everybody else can look at the situation and there's at least something someone can do about it. So it's all over the spectrum, the concept of control. But I just wanted to kind of build a bridge here between this aspect of humanity where people can get caught up in control, and then how maybe that can turn and become very malignant. And I know there's a lot more to this, and I'm certainly no professional or expert, but I just like to ponder things. And so in the end, right, if we are on the receiving end of things, well, first of all, if you ever notice controlling behaviors in yourself, and I've noticed that in myself before, and it was very confusing to me, and I did partake in some of that sort of like anxiety. If something felt outside of my control, I was able to tie it to feeling like I was responsible even though I wasn't. And then you can kind of, if this resonates with you, you can kind of take this way back, years prior, even possibly in your childhood, and say, why did my brain become wired in that manner to feel responsible for things that I'm not responsible for? And so, again, there are people who strive to become conscious, and people who don't or can't. I don't think that's the same. I think there are some who can't, maybe, or they can only do it to a degree, and then there are some who just won't. They just refuse. And that's, talked about in the Bible. People who just refuse to be enlightened, basically. It's the reprobate mind. And so at some point, it's kind of like, it just is what it is. But, I think it's good if you can do that work on yourself and root out all of those unhealthy behaviors and mindsets, and you get a lot of healing along the process too. But if you're on the receiving end of control, I think that accepting the situation, because then it comes down to, well, I can't control the fact that this person is controlling. You kind of have to just accept it and become strong enough in your own self to really, what you're doing is you're releasing these people to God, is what you're doing. And I think that's even harder if this is like an enmeshed family environment. It's extra work because you're learning the boundaries, that each person is truly in their own autonomous person that should have their own agency, But I want to close with this. I'll kind of keep this one short. This message here, this card, just so beautiful. It says, are my actions supporting the life I'm trying to create? And so, this is something that can wake you up too. If you are doing everything you can, and it's like you're spinning your wheels, and you're not getting anywhere, you may have to wake up to the fact that your life is being undermined in some way, or maybe many ways. And this gets into like the super malignant part of the spectrum. If there's someone in your life who's reaching psychopathy, I guess you might say, who's actually interfering with your life to some degree to keep you from the fruit of your labor, and you're exhausted, and if this is something new in your life, you can very easily compare with the past and be like, well, in the past I didn't have this problem. In the past, I wasn't as forgetful. If I put something down and I know where it is, well, it's going to be there when I go back to it, or whatever it is, okay? Or if I started building, a friendship or, a relationship with someone, it had this normal progression. But over here now, ever since I've moved into this neighborhood or whatever it is, I've gotten involved with this friend, or maybe this has been ongoing all your life because it's your family, who knows? And that makes it hard because you don't have anything to compare with. And that's why it can be a shock, I think, to some of us when you see, oh, it doesn't have to be this way, But, just a little tip here too. If there's someone in your life who likes to be the one who goes between you and other people and, kind of communicates for you and to you from others, you don't know for sure what they're saying to this other person about you and the things they're saying to you about this other person, and then suddenly you're reacting to something that isn't even true, and then they can take that and say, oh, well, this person said this. And it's like, yeah, but that was based on this. And you get into like, all this gossip and just and you're thinking, how did this happen? This is not a part of my character. And just kind of keep an eye out for that. If people start changing the way they are around you, or they don't communicate much with you anymore, and there's someone in the midst between you, then it's just something to consider. So again, it goes back to the Bible. It's don't cast your pearls before the swine. That's where your discernment has to kick in to identify the swine. You know, and it's hard to, because they're in sheep's clothing. They look just like the rest of us. It's, you know, and I don't mean like physically, I mean like in their behaviors. They're, you know, they're doing things that seem good and right and loving and great, but yet on the down low, they're sabotaging and things like that. And that can have a great impact on your life, a great impact in multiple areas, multifaceted. Just a really strong impact. So I just wanted to say that to you. And you know, I want to close with this. I said that like, what, 10 minutes ago, but I really do this time. The first thing on my mind this morning was really cool. It was a Bible verse, and I'll drop it in the description because I don't actually remember it word for word, and I don't remember exactly where the verse is in the Bible. I'll have to Google it, and I'll put it in the description. But, you know, to tie into yesterday's video, the verse that I woke up with, and I thought this was cool. You know, God's been really quiet in my life lately, which has kind of been a little concerning for me. It's like, why? But this was cool because I know this came from the heavens. This came from God right here. I woke up, and the verse that I remembered is something like, it's the joy of godly men or people, or his disciples, or God's children, something like that, to seek out the mysteries of God. And it's the joy of God, of the Lord, to hide the mysteries. So I thought that was cool. It's like a little a healthy game, you know. So yeah, God's always there with you. And I want to say this. All this stuff can feel really heavy if you have a person like this in your life, and you're trying to figure out the things that are, you know, why are things going wrong, and you're the kind of person who automatically assumes it's you, but maybe you haven't considered there's a spirit of sabotage working in your life, okay? And this can be possibly within your own mind, you know, because of it being worked for years and years, and you going through psychological abuse, but it could also be literal and physical and real from another person in your life. So all this can get really heavy, and when you don't really understand the whole situation, but you want out of it, it can kind of feel like you just really, not only do you need a break from it, do you need a vacation, you just want to just go. You want to get out of the situation completely, but you don't know really what to do. You don't know where to go. And then you quickly have this other thought, well, I do anyway, of it's everywhere. You can't escape evil, you know, from the spiritual viewpoint stance. You can't. It's truly everywhere. And so it can feel really oppressive, okay? And the key here is to understand that there is a way forward, even in the midst of all this. There's a really cool song. I'll drop that in the description to you right this second. I haven't heard it in a long time. I can't remember even who sings it or the title of it, but I remember one of the lyrics says, "We be dancing in the war." And it's a really happy, uplifting song. And it says, they didn't know let's see if I remember how it goes. They didn't know that we have wings. They didn't know that we fly, you know, and that's just it. God's people are everywhere, but they are amidst the wolves in sheep's clothing. And so what a blessing for, you know, the Holy Spirit to give us the gift of discernment and to grow in it. The growth in your discernment is such a blessing. It's hard. It's real hard as you learn to identify certain things. But ultimately, if you can use these as spiritual signs of the path to take, which ultimately becomes your faith walk, okay? And you are showing God your obedience in your faith walk through your strength and willingness to let go of unhealthy behaviors in your life, paradigms in your mind, people, environments, whatever it is. It takes strength. But when you are obedient, there's nothing like it. And I just want to encourage you to remember that you don't have to have a lot of money or just the perfect situation or circumstances to find this path, you know, because evil is everywhere, but so is God and His people. So I hope that this has been encouraging to you. I hope that it got the wheels turning. Thank you so much for coming along to hear the message, and I'll see you again very soon. Oh, and I'll probably do another video tomorrow, and then I'm not sure about the next day, but then it'll be a little bit of a break that I won't be able to make a video, but I'll still try to post at least. So, and just touch base with you all and say hello. So again, thanks so much. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.